Hi guys, it is very nice to meet you here at the conference. So how are you? Hi. Yeah, great. So, 2 years ago, my company, EPAM Systems, asked me for helping implementing accessibility for their customer because their customer wanted their app truly accessible and usable for everyone. So, and during these 2 years, I've gained a lot of experience about accessibility, some best practices, team leadership, and so on. And today I'm going to share this experience, share my best practices, and you can make your iOS and maybe other mobile applications fully usable for every people. And let's get started. The agenda for today is first we're going to talk about what is accessibility and why should we support it. Second, we're going to learn how visually impaired people use their devices with a technology called VoiceOver. And next, we're going to dive deeper into how can we work with the iOS accessibility API. We'll learn how can we make accessibility elements, how can we assign them, learn about the navigations, and how to perform different actions. And at the end, I'm going to show you some extra features and share some extra tips, which will help bring in the accessibility support in your application. So, what is accessibility? Has everyone here already worked or got in touch with accessibility? Okay, great. So, as we all know, the accessibility is the UI adaptation for various groups of people. So, for example, if someone has completely lost the ability to see or was born with it, but still they can use, for example, a service without any noticeable problems. And this is what accessibility is all about. So this is a conference all dedicated for great UIs. So let's think what comes in mind when we hear words great UI. Of course, it's responsive, fast, easy to understand, sightly, and last but not least and very important, it is accessible. Can we call our UI great if it's not accessible? Maybe in some cases. For example, if you know for sure that your application will be used for a small group of people, which you know for sure that they are completely healthy. Like years ago, I developed a small application intended for plane piloting, and we knew that all our customers were healthy enough to pilot the plane, so the adopting accessibility was not the top priority for our UI. Now let's going to talk about why should we support accessibility. And first, you are doing the right thing. We all try to get to reach as much customers as possible with our services and applications. And among all these customers, there will be a small group of people always with different disabilities, and they want and have right to use our applications fully as the others. And as a developers, I think we are responsible for delivering this experience for them. And also everyone will be happy because, of course, our users will be happy because they'll appreciate your effort of bringing the proper accessibility support for them. And sometimes they may write you letters of thanks, and in these moments you will get an enormous satisfaction from your job because you've just realized that you made someone's life a little bit easier. Also, I'd like to mention that the group of customers which relies on assistive technology is usually extremely loyal. As I said, they'll appreciate your effort for making your application fully usable and convenient for them, and not likely they're going to switch to your competitor. And last but not least, this is not hard. So we don't have to launch our rockets into space. We don't do this here, no. Accessibility is very easy, not rocket science. In iOS and actually in Android, we have a powerful API which delivers all the features we need and have a lot of functionalities. And a great thing that the system tries to do lots of work by itself for us. Now let's gonna talk about how do visually impaired people use their devices. So they do this the same as us actually, because they rely on multi-touch gestures like swiping, slides, multi-finger gestures. But instead of seeing the UI, they hear. So they rely on an assisted technology called VoiceOver. So this is the iOS built-in technology, which can go through your application, speak about some information about your UI to the users. So it has a powerful speech engine, support of multi-touch gestures, and many different settings. So you can, as you can see, you can turn it on in settings, or you can set up an accessibility shortcuts and turn it on or off just by pressing home or power buttons three times. Now let's switch and talk about how does it work actually. And first, it goes through all the elements which are currently on screen and builds a special version of the UI designed to here. It is called accessibility tree or accessibility UI. So VoiceOver builds up the navigation order and remembers some information for announcing for user later. So please have a look at the schematic example here. And after that, users can navigate between those elements with a tool called Focus. Let's see how it looks like. After user put an element into focus, VoiceOver will pronounce all the important information about this element to the user. It will pronounce its title, type, and whether it has some possible interactions. And let's see the video.
Clock, edit, button. 9:05, tomorrow only. Change, button.
So as I said, VoiceOver tries to do lots of work by itself, and all we have to do is to help him a little by describing all the UI elements as we want. So let's see what we actually have to do. First, we're going to make accessible objects from our UI. Then we're going to assign them, set the text which will be pronounced by VoiceOver, and last but not least, we may also do some work improving the navigation. And now let's going to learn how can we make accessible objects from our UI. And first, I'm going to notice that if you want for an element to be accessible, you should override its accessibility element property and set its value to true. Otherwise, VoiceOver will just ignore it, as you can see on the video.
View 1, View 3, View 1, View 3.
So as you can see, VoiceOver simply jumps over the View 2 bit because it's not marked as accessible element, and it will be ignored. So great thing that almost all UI kit views in iOS are accessible by default. For example, such well-known classes as UI label, UI button, UI text field, and UI search field, following the other classes extending UI controls, are accessible by default. So that means that VoiceOver will focus it out of the box, and they have already some default text for pronouncing, and all you have to do is to tweak those values a little if you want. So you may ask, are all UI kit views are accessible by default? And the answer is no. Such container views like UI collection view, UI table view, and UI stack view are not accessible by default. So that means that VoiceOver will not focus the entire table or collection view, but instead only views inside of it. And I also going to mention that UI view itself is not accessible by default, and if you want it to be focusable, accessible, you'll have to set the flag to true or set the accessibility label. Sometimes accessibility element can act as a containers for others. As I said, that means that VoiceOver will not focus the entire container view, but only views inside of it. So to achieve this, just specify an exact element, exact array of elements you want to be in focus. And let's see how Apple implemented this practice in their clock application on recent alarm cell.
9:05, tomorrow morning. Change, button.
Now let's going to talk about how can we sign an element. And first comes the accessibility label. Accessibility label is a title of an element that it should describe the main purpose of it. So it is built in for some classes, for example, UI label or UI button, and can be defined explicitly, as you can see on this slide. So this setup is very simple. You just have to override the property, set the string you want to be pronounced, and let's see how does it work.
View 1, View 2.
Now comes the accessibility value. Accessibility value represents if an object if an object has some value, and VoiceOver will pronounce this value with a slightly different intonation. So this serves user for better orientation across the elements and helps them to understand that there are some important elements which should be more attention on. It can be used for with the steppers, for example. Let's see how does it work.
You have ordered 5 pizzas. Decrement button. Decrement. You have ordered 4 pizzas.
Last but not least is the accessibility hint. Accessibility hint is an optional tip which VoiceOver will pronounce at the end. So for most tappable object, it consists of the double tap to phrase plus action name. So this setup is also very simple.
Profile button. Double tap to open.
Also, I'd like to share some important points regarding those hints. First, please keep them short, place only important information here. So follow the pattern double tap to phrase plus action name, and do not make them really long, and do not place important information regarding your application's features, policies, legal information, because those hints can be easily turned off in the device's settings, and user will just skip this important information. All the accessibility labels, hints, and values have their attributed analogs. So, for example, if you want to add some extra customization, like specifying a speech pitch, for example, or specifying exact language, or ask VoiceOver to pronounce the word letter by letter, you can create an instance of attributed string, add some range, add some attributes, and override the accessibility attributed label, hint, or value property. Now let's going to talk about the accessibility traits. So when designing our UI, we use tons of different UI components. For example, buttons, tabs, labels, you name it. So accessibility elements have their own types too. For example, we want to say to VoiceOver that our element is the button, for example. How can we do this? There are 2 ways actually, and first is the wrong one. We can just place the word button into the accessibility label, but this is definitely not correct because we have concrete tool designed just for that, and this tool is called accessibility traits. So as I said, its purpose is to describe the type of the element, whether it's a button or header or something, its state, and sometimes indicate there are some additional actions are available when the element is in focus. So as you can see on slide, an element may have only one accessibility trait, or you can specify an array of them. Let's start talking about the accessibility traits with the simpler ones. Button and header. So basically, button trait indicates if an object is a button, if user can tap on it, and the header trait indicates if an object is a header, for example, for a view controller or for some collection. And let's see how it sounds like.
Accessibility elements. Heading. View 1. Button.
Sorry. Now let's going to talk about the selected trait. Selected trait indicates if an object is selected in a checkbox, for example. But before the video, please note that you can insert and remove any accessibility trait dynamically anytime you want to. And now let's watch a video.
Accessibility elements. Heading. View 2. Button. Selected. View 2. View 2.
Now let's going to talk about an interesting trait called updates frequently. So its trait indicates basically if the state of an object updates constantly, and VoiceOver will have to re-announce its updated state without, for example, resetting focus to this element. So the classic example of the usage of this trait is a timer or stopwatch component. And let's see how Apple implemented the exact stopwatch component in their clock application.
Stop. 1 second. 7 seconds. 11 seconds.
So as you can see, VoiceOver re-announces the updated amount of seconds from time to time without any direct action from the user. Now let's go and talk about the adjustable trait. So basically, this trait adds an extra vertical swipes to an element, and you can control with these swipes some value. So this setup is very simple. Like you can see on the code, you have to just set the value of accessibility traits property to adjustable and override two functions called accessibility increment and decrement and control this value inside. So it can be convenient for using with the steppers, for example. It is much more easier to control it with vertical swipes rather than constantly switching between plus and minus buttons. So let's see.
You have adjustable. Swipe up or down with one finger to adjust the value. 5 pizzas, 6 pizzas, 4 pizzas, 3 pizzas.
Adjustable also can be used for controlling collections. As you can see on this slide, I've implemented the custom adjustable collection view. Inside the accessibility increment and decrement logic, I placed the accessibility scrolling functions. Let's see how Instagram implemented the same control in their story highlights tray.
Highlights tray. Mountains. 1 of 7. Adjustable. Sea. 2 of 7. Night. 3 of 7. City. 4 of 7. Sky. 5 of 7. Green. 6 of 7.
So those adjustable collections can be convenient for use, for example, when you have a screen with multiple horizontal carousels and a user can navigate between those carousels using a regular horizontal swipe, and they can navigate inside each collection using adjustable vertical swipes. Now let's going to talk about the navigation. So basically, as I said, the accessibility navigation is just moving focus from one element to another. But I also would like to share some information regarding this focus. First, you can only interact with only one element which is currently in focus. So that means that you cannot place into focus multiple elements, and you cannot interact with any elements which is unfocused. And second, you won't miss, because all coming actions from the screen will be received only by the element which is currently in focus. For example, like on this slide, first time I tapped into inside the one cell, but my action will be received only inside the currently focused cell. There are several navigation ways. First, and the primary one, is the swiping between elements. Second, user can slide across the screen with one finger. And last but not least, they can use a special gesture. So during this talk, I'm going to cover only the swiping between elements because it's a primary way used for testing and in production. So when navigating by swiping, focus follows the pattern. The first focused element is always by default the top left one. And then when a user decides to navigate further, the focus moves according to the rule from left to right, from top to bottom. That means that swipe from left to right will move focus to the next element, and from right to left will move focus to the previous element. Let's see the example. Also, users can scroll different accessibility collections by 3-finger swiping. So this is actually very simple, but if you want to attach some code to this gesture, just override the accessibility scroll function and do the job inside. Let's see the video.
Back button. The Bombay No. Page 2 of 9. Page 3 of 9.
And now let's going to talk about the navigation between screens. And first, we're going to talk about backwards navigation. Imagine a screen with tons of different accessibility elements and a cancel button. So instead, just swipe their way right until the user will reach the cancel button. They can use a special gesture called scrub gesture. So basically, user may draw a Z button anywhere on screen, and this gesture will bring them back right to the previous screen. So great thing that your navigation controller, your Popova controller, and native modules have already built-in support for this gesture. But if you want to add it, for example, for a custom screen or collection, just override the accessibility perform escape function and do your code there. And now let's going to talk about the navigation forward. Like on previous slide, imagine a screen with tons of different elements and some primary actions. Like on this slide, we have a purchases screen with a title, lots of purchases cell, and a button. So instead, just swipe and swipe and swipe until we get to the purchase button. We can execute the magic tap gesture. So basically, it's double tap with 2 fingers. And we can attach some code to any code we want to this gesture. And this action will be executed anywhere on screen also. And the purchase button may not have been in focus at all. So it will improve the navigation for the users. Let's see how does it look.
Purchases. Purchase 1, purchase 2, purchase 3. Alert. Success.
Besides swiping, users, of course, can tapping on elements. There are 2 primary taps, a single tap and double tap. Let's start with the single one because it's very easy. By single tapping, VoiceOver will just announce all the information about the UI element.
View 2, button. Accessibility elements, heading. View 1.
Now let's going to talk about double tap. So double tap basically equals the standard tap on a button, for example, without VoiceOver turned on. So it will execute the action you have written for your button. Let's see the video.
Tap action. Profile, button. Profile, alert, profile. Profile, great, button. Double tap action.
In most cases, it successfully handles the default action you have written for your control, but if you want to add some customization, you can always override the accessibility action. So every UIKit class has a function called accessibility activate, so you can override it, play some action, and this action will be executed only by double tapping in VoiceOver mode. So first, on the example, I'm going to tap the button without VoiceOver, then I turn it on and execute the double tap gesture on this button. Let's see.
VoiceOver on, at profile, button, profile.
Sometimes an element may have more than one accessibility actions. So to achieve this, just create an instance of class UI accessibility custom action, fill in all the necessary parameters, and and override the accessibility custom actions property with the array of your created instances. So let's see how Apple implemented this practice again in their clock application.
Clock, edit, button, 044, alarm, off. Double tap to toggle setting, actions available, edit, delete, activate, default.
So as you can see, VoiceOver just pronounced all the instances we have created, and user can switch between those actions using vertical swipes. Now let's talk about some additional features which will help you to adapt accessibility in your application. And first, when user has accomplished some important actions or an error has occurred and you want it to be announced for the user. Oh, sorry. Sometimes you want to reposition of the focus programmatically. Place it into some specific element. So to achieve this, just call the UI accessibility post function, and as a notification, use screen change or layout change notification, and as argument, place the exact view you want to be in focus.
Change screen. Go to Views button. View to button.
So there are two notifications for controlling focus, as I said, screen change and layout change. In which case should we use each one? First, use screen change when you have moved to a different screen and you want to, for example, to set the first focused element on it, and use layout change when you are within the same screen, its layout has changed and you want to reposition the focus. Also, when user has completed some important action or the error has occurred, you want it to be announced for the user. So to achieve this, just call the same function called accessibility post, but instead of screen changed and layout changed, use the announcement one. And as argument, place the screen you want to be announced.
Announce string. Announce button. Accessibility string.
Now let's going to talk about modals. When a modal view appears, you want for VoiceOver to focus only the views inside of it, but not behind. So to achieve this, just override the accessibility view is modal property of your view, set it to true. And as you can see, Instagram implemented the custom modal post creation sheet, marked it as accessibility modal, and VoiceOver will focus only views inside of the green area, but not inside the red one. You can check for yourself. Now let's conclude and talk once again how can we begin implement accessibility in our existing applications. First, sign all the accessibility elements properly. Use accessibility label, trees, and values and hints to describe to the user what this element is all about. Second, make accessibility elements bigger. So like on the left example, there is no need to make every single element inside of the cell as a separate accessibility element. Instead, make the whole cell as a big one accessibility element, signed properly with all of the values of its labels, and attach the toggle actions directly to the cell. And it will be much more easy and convenient for user to navigate. Also, do some work improving the navigation, and let's see what we should check. First, use navigation via swipes for testing. Second, check if navigation follows general rules from left to right, from top to bottom. And next, check if all needed elements are focused correctly, and check for VoiceOver doesn't skip the important elements. And last, check navigation between screens. Adapt a scrub or magic tab gesture if you want to, and check your modals. Also, maybe you will be in a situation when you will struggle on how to adapt a specific use case to accessibility properly, or you maybe will face some bug which will be hard to fix. And if you are in this situation, always watch how Apple implemented accessibility in their own applications. So maybe you will find that your use case implemented here and you can copy the solution. Or you will find that your bug is also presented in the Apple applications, which will be indication that the problem is on Apple side, and all you have to do is to write them about it. Also, you may do some work adopting your general UI. For example, if you have a super custom component and you know for sure that it is almost impossible to adopt to accessibility properly, just replace it with a system analog. For example, UI alert controller or UI action sheet. Also, you may listen to a notification whether VoiceOver turned on or off, and you can provide different solutions in those cases. So let's see how YouTube added some extra buttons for controlling player in their YouTube application.
VoiceOver on YouTube. Introducing iPhone 14 Pro landscape. VoiceOver off. VoiceOver on landscape. Forwards 10 seconds. Button.
So we've just covered all the necessary iOS accessibility basics, and if you want to study more, you can check, for example, an interesting topic called accessibility rotor. This is the advanced navigation technique. So in iOS, we have plenty of built-in rotors, and we can even create a custom one. So if you are interested, I'll leave you a link for self-studying. And I didn't forget about SwiftUI, because it's very simple. But instead of properties, SwiftUI use the modifiers. So if you learn the UIKit accessibility basics, you will switch to SwiftUI really quickly. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for your attention, and I open for your questions.